G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you. Our guest today is Nikhil Vadgama, co-founder of Exponential Science, which is a global non-profit foundation focusing on combining blockchain with other cutting-edge technologies like AI, quantum computing, AR, VR, and other deep tech. He is also Deputy Director of the University College London UCL Centre for Blockchain Technologies and the author of several published works, including Enabling the Internet of Value, How Blockchain Connects Global Business. With the exponential age upon us, we're excited to talk to Nikhil about the future, the coming exponential transformations that will be driven by technology, and where he thinks we need to be in terms of education to equip our children for this new world. It's going to be a great chat. Let's dive in. How did you first hear about or get into blockchain?
Sure. So it was a few years ago. That feels like so long ago, you know. And I think it was about 2017, 18 when I kind of started really getting into the space. And so my background kind of getting into all this is through academia, right? And at that point I was coming into academia and I was working on a project. Actually, it was an AI that was looking to commercialize some intellectual property that was developed at UCL. And as part of the exercise of looking at the commercialization possibilities, we started looking at how it could, this particular project could also fit with other technologies. And one of the ones we started researching was into blockchain itself, right? And that's where I started getting the first kind of deeper interest into blockchain, which I hadn't done before. I had, followed Bitcoin from a few years before. I had kind of made some transactions. I had, kind of got a wallet, but it was all sort of really clunky. It was difficult to use, right? But and then so I kind of stayed away and then saw the price kind of going up and thought, oh damn, why didn't I buy some of that stuff? But or at least hold it, right? I am one of those people who had Bitcoin and transacted with it to buy things, but never held it. So I'm like a real user, right? But I'm not. Unfortunately, that didn't make me rich like if I'd held it today. But and so that was the first time I really started getting into it and researching into the technology and really seeing where it could go. And then I kind of, I had an offer to join kind of the UCL Centre for Blockchain Technology, that's University College London, where I basically helped to develop the blockchain centre there, expand it to be one of the largest academic centers in the world through the kind of industry partnerships they have, through the number of fellows and associates that are associated with it, and then from there onwards have kind of had one foot in academia and one foot in industry, and along that period have kind of done things all the way from starting and building a digital bank, which I did a couple of years ago with a project called Twig, to also starting the DLT Science Foundation and, more recently, the Exponential Science Foundation, which is kind of a way for us to basically help develop the ecosystem with blockchain and other emerging technologies as well. So that's really, it started off as a bit of a research project into blockchain and has become something that is kind of the whole, what's everything I do now, right? Blockchain, AI, and kind of the intersection between these technologies.
So you didn't ditch AI to jump into blockchain, but obviously back in 2017, smart contracts start to become start to materialize really, and kind of blockchain hits the meta and, the ICO craze and whatnot. So you're still involved in the academic pursuit of AI at the time while adding blockchain. Is that what I'm hearing? Or
exactly, yeah. No, I mean, so my background is, many years ago is from physics, right? And so kind of you're making the transition from physics into AI, at the end of the day, it's all maths, right? So it's easier. It wasn't so big of a jump. And then when you're going from that into blockchain, you're dealing with two kind of things. Either you're doing deep technical research, which is all on the cryptography elements, right? Or kind of you're doing more kind of stuff on the business and strategy aspect of trying to get, the technology adopted, building use cases, building the technology out as well. So it's kind of, it was perhaps easier for me to get into AI than it was for blockchain, where, I mean, even you think about it in terms of the adoption of the two technologies, right? If you want to use AI, it's there in your face, right? You can go into ChatGPT and you can see the outputs come straight out into you. If you ask someone, what's your interaction with blockchain? Well, unless they've transacted with cryptocurrencies, they probably wouldn't really be able to come up with how have I used blockchain, right? Because at the end of the day, when blockchain's working best, it's in the background. It's a business process technology, right? You're not supposed to be seeing it. But what you are going to get is more efficiency, better security, more decentralization, and all these kind of great things that come with it.
Yeah. And one of the I was going to say critiques. It's not a critique, really. Well, maybe one of the hard parts of being in academia, and I'm not in academia, I'm more on the commercialization side, but is that it's hard to get academics sometimes to commercialize. But it seems like you're straddling that kind of, you got a foot in both camp really well. How do you find, I guess, translating academia into the business world and business into academia? How do you kind of, is it a translation effort? Is it just a factor of dealing with people, or is it a factor of getting on and doing it, or do you keep these people over there and those people over there, and as long as you're making it work in the middle, it works all right? How do you handle that aspect of commercialization out of academia?
Sure. I mean, in some parts of academia, there's it's much easier to commercialize things, right? If we talk about, biotech or the medical industry, right? All of that comes out of university research, and there's a clear pathway for that to come through into commercialization. When you're talking more in like computer science, it's a bit harder, and particularly with blockchain, if you're doing deep fundamental research into things and then translating that into commercial opportunities, the hardest thing you have to deal with really is the academic themselves, which is I'm really interested in the research, but I don't care so much about the commercial aspect, right? And so it's trying to basically get these guys to understand the benefits of commercializing the technology itself. That's one thing. Then the other part is dealing with the university infrastructure, right? You've got these kind of bodies that are hundreds of years old in some respects, and also where there's a ton of bureaucracy, right? And you've got to get over all these hurdles that are put in place. And one of the worst things that they used to do, which has become much better now, is just how much they want to take, right? Like if you've created a project, in terms of the IP, right? If you've created a project, before it was like the university wanted more than 50%. Well, then what's the incentive for you as the entrepreneur to go and really build something with that, right? So those schemes are becoming much better. And indeed, the access schemes to actually get the help that you need is becoming better as well. So things are improving. And actually, that's one area where we're trying to look at in particular by exploring this area of decentralized science and seeing how we can actually come up with some novel mechanisms, be that in either, looking at IP transfer, looking at, improving citation outcomes, looking at improving project funding, looking at improving peer review, all these kind of things within the space itself. And so that's kind of on the academic side. And on the business side, it's about, I'd say the hardest aspect is really just getting in front of the right audiences, right? Which is the same in any kind of business environment. I think, sometimes business comes to academia and they certainly have a very high opinion of academia, and they believe that academia has all the answers. But academia has specific answers to specific things, right? And sometimes those things aren't the things that the commercial world really wants. So it's about, also it's about translating that between the two different parties. And this is what we try and do at the Exponential Science Foundation, right? We try and be the bridge between our knowledge in academia, our experience that we have in developing companies and launching them in the commercial world, and trying to marry the two, and kind of, the research work that we're doing at our foundation actually has a cycle whereby, some of it's great and it goes open source, and some of it, may not have any useful outcome, right? Except for just broadening knowledge. But some of the stuff, we think actually does have some commercial value. And that's where we kind of try and double down. We try and build a business plan around it. We put some investment into it. We talk to industry about it. And we try and launch it as a spin out, effectively, right? And so we try and create companies that come from ourselves. And so it's like taking a little bit of a venture builder approach, if you like. And that's great for us, because it's, really cool to be playing around with interesting research and seeing how far we can push it. And it also gives the foundation kind of a longevity, right? Because if we're producing these companies, then we're, returning hopefully some capital back to the organization that helps us continue to do the great kind of research, education, and innovation kind of program work that is at the heart of the foundation's mission.
Yeah. How did you come up with the idea to start the Exponential Science Foundation?
Yeah, I mean, it came from this kind of frustration we had in academia of really being able to deal with industry in the way that they wanted, right? I mean, when we in academia, we had so many kind of blockchain companies come to us and say, hey, we want to partner with you. We want you guys to do research. We want you guys to, do education programs, all these things. And then we'd start dealing with them, and going to the university administration, and then the administration is like, whoa, who are these guys? Right? This company started a few years ago, don't know anything. Oh, it's associated with Bitcoin. Oh, they want to pay in cryptocurrency. Oh God, no, we can't touch any of this stuff, right? And so it became really frustrating to deal with that. And then after you get even over that hurdle, there's a particular issue you have, that when universities take funding, that they charge an enormous overhead cost. Right. So if they're giving, £1 to the university for us to do research with, the actual amount that we see is maybe, 60 pence, something like that. Right. Because there's a whole bunch that's taken by the university that just goes into this kind of mysterious hole that nobody knows what it is, but is required to really fund the university operations. So because of that and the overall bureaucracy, we thought, okay, why don't, we're doing great work. Can we try and do this in an environment where there's much more flexibility, where there is also the opportunity to try and make a greater impact faster and work, with these new emerging technologies in the way that they should be worked with? And that's what led to the birth of kind of the Exponential Science Foundation itself. And we had great support from industry. So, one of our biggest backers is Hedera, a layer one blockchain, who's funded us and made kind of, our mission possible.
Yeah, right. That's amazing. So you've got the industry partnerships, you have the pipeline of academia. One of the things that I found very interesting about what you said before was about looking at what is the intersection of AI and blockchain, or how are we compounding various technologies to actually do things and research things that we couldn't do before, or can't do abstract of one of them, for example. How are you finding the layering or connecting or collaboration across academia, corporations, I don't know, even governments, or even just researchers across disciplines? What kinds of things are you most excited about coming out of that kind of collaboration? Or what are you seeing that is being attempted or achieved that wasn't attemptable or even thinkable beforehand?
I think, what one of the things that there's two kind of things, right? One is greater interconnectedness. Okay. And this is not only in technology itself, right? So this is like blockchain connecting with AI, or blockchain with quantum, or AI and quantum computing, right? But it's also greater interconnectedness between, academia, business, and regulators themselves, for instance. So when we go out at conferences and meet people, there's always a great demand to actually have multiple different opinions in the room, to actually be able to discuss the potential and use cases and the future of these. And this is particularly also needed from like the regulators themselves, right? Because these guys are dealing with these kind of technologies that are evolving in an exponential way. And indeed, like, like, how they're being deployed is completely brand new for government, for instance. In many ways, it's completely brand new for business as well. So it's important that you get multiple stakeholders with different opinions around the table, and then really, listen to the different points of view. Now, it's another thing whether or not, regulators and business then listen to these particular opinions, but at least, we're getting these opinions that are coming through. And I think, the narrative in the last few years, particularly with blockchain, particularly with the intersection of blockchain and AI and so forth, has become much more real as well, right? I mean, for years we're talking about, okay, throughout the entire boom period, I mean, remember, the first ICO boom and then the crypto winter and so forth, right? It's like, the use cases are coming, the use cases are coming, the use cases are coming, right? But now I think you see much more realization about actually the true utility of blockchain and actually where it is being deployed, right? And the same is going to come with AI itself, right? I mean, you've got, AI being utilized for so many things. There's still such a huge hype at the moment about the potential of AI. I mean, you see it reflected in the valuations of companies within the artificial intelligence space itself. That needs to, that also needs to deliver as well. And it's like, but the one thing that people, I think, always forget is that we're living it, right? We're using these technologies. We're seeing it. You go out on the street and you tell people about ChatGPT, half the people won't have heard of it at all, right? Or have used it, right? And I see the same. I mean, I talk to my parents about, they come and ask me, how do I do this or how do I do that? I'm like, well, why don't you ask ChatGPT? It will tell you and it will guide you through exactly how you should do it in an absolutely great way. But they just don't know about it, and also they also don't really want to use it either. So we've got to remember, right, that the adoption curve still needs to come for these technologies also to realize their true value, particularly for AI. I think for blockchain we're in a different space now, and I think that's particularly true based on the results we had in the US a couple of weeks ago with Trump coming into office, and that's, I think that's really, really exciting for the space.
Yeah, man. It's funny, you mentioned about people not using ChatGPT. Yeah, I still get frustrated that people, if, they come to me with a problem and I ask, have you even Googled it yet? And they haven't utilized, decades old technology now of searching the web, let alone having something that can, probabilistically create some intelligence that's going to help you perhaps specifically with your request, not just generally give you some leads of where you might be able to find your answer. I mean, you've been in, so blockchain has been around for a while now. 2017 was one of those big cohorts. So you came in with one of those big cohorts, although you were already kind of, around it as a user. And also recently, but AI, it seems that it's really been the last 18 months that's really kind of hit the mainstream, perhaps with ChatGPT 3, maybe 3.5. But you've been working in AI for a lot longer than that. What was the goal, say 5 or 8 years ago compared to the goal today with AI? Is it the same? But across different verticals or applications, or is there something markedly different today?
I think, so large language models have been around for a while, right? Like this whole idea of being able to process and utilize text through machine learning, that's been around for a long time. The real game changer that really came in the last 18 months was simply putting something on the front end, right? Sure. It was putting something on the front end that allowed people to interact with it in a brand new way. And, sometimes these things are so simple, but people don't think about it and don't have that particular breakthrough. And the same parallel is with like Bitcoin, Bitcoin wasn't, Satoshi Nakamoto, he, she, they, them, whatever, the AI, whatever, coming and inventing all these new things and mashing it together. It was really taking a few different things and putting them, into an interwoven piece and coming out with that technology. It's the same with, the breakthrough we've had in AI. It was simply putting that front end in place that allowed for people to actually say like, wow, this is the capability of the technology, which really, actually, even in the previous years was there. I mean, when I was working on my banking project, right? When we were using customer service automation, we were using, GPT models already for that kind of stuff and large language models. And people didn't realize that they were, or maybe they did realize because it wasn't so great an experience. But, that it was a chatbot that was initially, interfacing with them, right? But it was simply taking that and saying, well, look, let's make it more general purpose and let's make it more interactive for people and that's been the biggest kind of shift, that simple, really simple thing. And sometimes with technology, it is just that. It's really a simple thing that comes along to really completely change the way you view something and to make a kind of big breakthrough with it.
What do you think?
I think.
You go.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think, one of the biggest things that's changed in academia with this is that previously, everyone used to look at academia as being the ones that make the breakthrough for AI, right? I mean, if we look at, many of my colleagues, like they're all working at the university, but they're working for Amazon, they're working for Google, and like UCL is particularly famous for incubating DeepMind, right? Which went to Google, and there, the innovation that was taking place with developments in algorithms, new models, and so forth, that was part and parcel. Now, if you want to compete in the age of large language models, you need an enormous amount of data, and you need a huge amount of compute. Universities have tight budgets, right? I mean, there's no way they're able to compete on this particular aspect. So it's completely changed, and I think maybe that's not such a bad thing, because that also means that researchers can now focus on the things like making, processes more efficient. Like why do you have to have such a huge, large model in order to make, computation or to do inference? That's one area. You can also think that, that's a good point for energy efficiency as well. And you can think about, again, new novel algorithm design, which is always something that's going to be important to go forward with. So it's kind of been a refocusing. But, the days where I suppose academia were the leaders, well, not anymore. At the moment, it's like industry is leading simply because, they've got the firepower to be able to. And in fact, it's just a couple of companies on Earth, right, that have the firepower to be able to do it.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, they're utilizing it as well, right? It's like an arms race.
Yeah.
You mentioned like the interface being the thing that really set off the AI era. One of the things with AR and VR, they've kind of had a few false starts, and I heard Apple is going to be, they had their little start with their vision, and now not so much following through on that. But a lot of, at least the science fiction movies over the last 25 years have featured AR fairly heavily as this is coming. This is the promise. More so maybe even than AI, certainly more than blockchain. Maybe blockchain hasn't even really made a blip in sci-fi yet. But anyway, what is the killer app UI for? Well, how come AI hasn't hit it yet? It seems to me, I mean, I can't wait for AR, man. It seems like there's so many amazing applications for AR. How is it not yet found that product market fit? What is the like command line chat GPT-3 style interaction with the LLMs for AR, do you reckon?
I mean, I think it's just, the devicing and the interface on the devicing needs to be good enough for anyone to use seamlessly, right? Like, with ChatGPT, it was just a search-like interface that you got. For AR to really take off, it needs to be, within my glasses, I'm getting some sort of augmented reality feed that I can simply control with my eye movements, right? Something like this. If you're getting it to that level, and already there are examples, right? You've got smart glasses and you've got these kind of things, but it still needs to develop further, right? Really to the point where, okay, I'm going in somewhere and I want to, I don't know, I'm having a meeting with someone and I want to pull up some notes or something, and it seamlessly displays in my glasses and I can read it. Or I'm going to a shop and I go and look at something and I want a price comparison, or I want more detailed information about the particular product. When it really is getting into that level, then you'll start to see, okay, that's the big breakthrough. But I think, the pieces are there. It's just the level of readiness and the price point are not there for consumers to for adoption to take off. And that's the same with Apple, right? I was really excited about their VR AR glasses, right? And but it wasn't glasses. It was a big headset that you had to put on, and I mean, I mean, you can't walk down the street with that, right? So that's the thing you need, But already, I mean, adoption always comes in phases. I always remember, like for AR, these kind of things, like already surgeons are using it. There's already usefulness in kind of design elements. People in the classroom are using it for certain things. So it is, it's on a gradual journey. It's just not reached that kind of critical tipping point. Right. And that tipping point's only going to come where it just becomes so easy. And at the moment, it's not so easy to put something, that's big on your face and to walk on the street and be like, well, fear of ridicule and fear of also someone just stealing it from you. Right. But when it gets there, that I think is a big tipping point. And that's just a question of miniaturization and improvement in the existing tech that's there.
So hardware. You don't think it's going to?
Yeah. I think it's hard
to like some sort of Neuralink interface where it's not projected in front of us, but rather.
Well, I think that's an even further step, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, how many people would be okay with kind of doing a Neuralink, right? Like, would you be all right planting a chip in your brain?
Well, I mean, for me, I think no. I think, even emphatically and absolutely no, but there's a sense in which humans are already somewhat androidic in that we are so beholden to our mobile phones, and if not, at least to our laptops, or at least to the World Wide Web and whatever we're using to interface with it. There's a sense in which we are already somehow dependent, or not interdependent perhaps, but certainly dependent on our devices, and we just voluntarily plug right in. And so, whether we don't have the wetware, if you like, we haven't developed to the place where we can handle our technological advancements. Like we're barreling ahead technologically, and on the one hand, it's wonderful and amazing, and then the potential is phenomenal. And even like before, you were mentioning about some of the research that Exponential has been kind of fostering, which doesn't seem to go anywhere. But I'm wondering, like, how much of that in 5 or 10 years' time, AI is going to pick up that odd research and go, oh, actually, that wasn't useful by itself, but it's very useful when we connect it with this other piece of seemingly unuseful technology or research. And so, but I also wonder, if we're bounding ahead, and obviously with AI, there have been some former large proponents of AI who have said, oh man, we need to slam on the brakes because we have not developed far along enough in our humanity to be able to handle this level of technological interaction. How are you thinking about this in terms of, because you kind of straddle the research, commercialization, and thinking about it. So I imagine you have a unique or at least a well thought through perspective on where are we in that kind of, call it evolution or developmental pathway.
Sure. I mean, the kind of, it was interesting that you just touched upon, like, some of the research we're doing at the moment might not be immediately useful, but when it's picked up and seen, from different angles in the future could be. And I think that's one of the most powerful things actually with kind of AI models that are in deployment now. It's the ability for them to really be able to give you different points of views from different ways and fields of thinking, right? Like, if you're looking at something, you can ask for, well, how can you interpret this from a physics point of view, right? Like, can we apply, entropy to this, or can we apply, some other kind of theories that come from physics that let you see things in a completely different way? And certainly, that's like, instead of using the technologies to say, okay, we'll spit out the answer, give me what your opinion is, actually getting it, working with it to give it these different point of views that really are completely things that, well, I never thought about it like that. That's the kind of the great aspect of it. And picking up on, this, what's in the future with AI, perhaps, developing so rapidly, and how are we going to fit into that, right? I mean, I think, there is, of course, a danger, right? That if the technology does develop too quickly and the results of that technology do show that that what is the need of people for certain things, that is an outcome that will have, well, really huge implications for the entire globe, right? How quickly are we away from that? I think we're still, quite a way away from it, right? I mean, if you listen to kind of opinions about how far the technology has progressed, how quickly the next stages of evolution will be coming, I still think, that there's still a technological barrier that needs to be broken with respect to compute, and still algorithmic development that does need to occur. I mean, I was talking to a colleague, who saw like, large language models at the moment have an IQ of, I don't know, 130 or whatever it was, right? But then my colleague simply said to me, well, that's because they've been doing nothing but training on IQ data sets, right? And the test sets, and they've learned how to answer the questions. So that's, so that is the reason why, right? And I'm sure, if we sat down and spent nothing but hours and hours and hours practicing these things, we'd also become better at answering them. So it is that, and it's putting it then in front of something that it's never seen before, which is always the thing with machine learning, right? It's always like, but some data, I'm training the model. The ultimate answer to whether or not the model is good is, what does it do on things it's never seen before, right? And it's getting much, much better at that. But I still think, people and our cognitive abilities, with the way, our brains are structured to be able to process information, are still better able to be dealing with that than machines at the moment. I think if it does get to the point where, we all feel threatened by AI, that's when we got to all put the chip in our head, right? Because the combination of human plus AI is still going to be better. I think that's when I think you've got the power of both, right? And you've got the ability to leverage our minds, the structures that we have in our brains, right, and the way that is efficiently computing things, and leveraging what we have with AI. And that's then you don't need the smart glasses, because then I actually don't know what that will feel like. Like,
sure,
something in your head communicating with you at the same time. It's kind of existential, it's difficult to imagine. It's like the little voice you have in your head, right? The monkey mind that's always talking to you. Is that going to be how AI is going to be, or is it just that suddenly you see the answer and you don't know where it came from? But I don't know.
Maybe like in the cartoons, just have one little guy over here and then another little guy over there. A different competing model. Here's Claude and here's Llama. And
yeah.
Well, so you mentioned the technological barrier, right? So is that a factor of, if I think back 25 years ago, we maybe collectively as a species, there would have been some outliers. We would not have thought, we thought 2025, we're going to have hoverboards and flying cars. I don't suspect most people thought we would have computers the power that they are in our pockets all the time, and rockets that get caught by chopsticks, and this kind of technological advancement that we have. Is it a factor of we're on that we're on the exponential technological curve up and we just can't see it? Or have we learnt more in the last 25 years about the bounds of physics and energy and algorithmic, computational, the computational power necessary to power algorithms, and we now know it's an actual barrier? Or is it just a factor of, oh man, we're at a plateau, and maybe we get one more step up and then we can zoom ahead. What we think is 100 years away might only be 5 years away or 10 years away. Have we actually learnt more, is what I'm asking, or is it still just the unknown?
No, I think we have, what we've certainly seen is a greater intertwinedness, and therefore kind of an exponential leverage with respect to that, right? I think, certainly in recent years, we've seen more and more different technologies come together. And when they come together, they leverage each other, right? And as more of them come together and more of them leverage, you kind of see an exponential increase. Now, the only bottleneck to that is us, right? how quickly can we learn to deal with and adopt these particular technologies themselves? And that's kind of, I think, the limiting factor you have of how we can comprehend to be able to use this. And then, from that, once people understand, then to diffuse it through into business and get the, regulatory approval and into government and so forth, right? That's the thing that kind of slows things down. And we've had kind of, many people have been constantly talking about, like Moore's law and the continual miniaturization of chips and so forth.
Mhm.
It's going to come to an end. It's going to come to an end. It's going to come to an end. It just continues to keep going, right? Like, so the potential, the potential is there, and that as it continues to keep going is just going to get smarter and smarter, right? Because now you've got, combining things with artificial intelligence, which is helping you think about ways to design and manufacture these things in new ways. You've got new ways of computation coming, right? Well, we don't need to keep miniaturizing. We can start using quantum, right? So when you put all these things together, then it's just, there's just so much potential. It's just we need to be able to understand how to utilize that and how to adopt that. And I think that's just going to be the kind of the limiting thing. The other point is just how we get in the way of scientific progress and discovery and technological development, right? I mean, if all we let's think back to COVID-19, right? If the world basically said that there is one priority at the moment, and that is to come up with a vaccine to basically eradicate this threat to human lives in the world, right? Imagine we could do the same for solving the climate issues we have. Imagine if the world came together and said, let's build a nuclear fusion reactor that works, right? We could solve climate change in a few years if people together and do that, right? It's not so far away, right? And it's not so far away if people really came together. When you've got siloed projects here and there, you're seeing little increments of progress and stuff, but you're not seeing kind of the breakthroughs that you need if everyone came together. And that's just us getting in the way of progress, right? And maybe that's one of the things, although it's like good with, if you say, okay, well, what's coming in the immediate future? Yeah, we've got some positive things going on. You've got Trump coming in the White House. That's great for crypto. That's great for blockchain. But on the other hand, he wants to be more isolationist. So from a technology perspective, that's America being, more on its own. That's the EU being more on its own. And then there's China also that's on its own there. And that's going to reduce collaboration as well. And that's going to further compound this it's just going to get in the way even more of the ability for us to continue to make progress with these things.
Have you spent any time thinking about how do you run the game theory on that? How do we align motivation across jurisdictions and governments? Is it even possible, or do we just have to go back to our technological overlords who have the capacity and say, hey, you guys have an obligation to humanity because you have the capacity and the technological firepower. Governments aren't going to work it out. You got to do it for the sake of mankind. Like, what's the solution to that?
I mean, I think, industry needs to take more responsibility, right? They need to they need to really be the ones that are helping regulators to understand. This is not to say that, industry should be self-regulated, right? So many times we've seen examples where industry tries to regulate itself, and well, there's a massive conflict of interest there, right? How does an industry police its own self, right? It's not, it doesn't really work as well. But there needs to be a better collaboration with it, and actually that's some of the thing that some of the areas that we're trying to focus on here with the Exponential Science Foundation. So, for example, in the European Union, right, we had the MiCA regulation being passed, which is relevant for anyone who is who has a token that's trading on any exchange or issuing a token in the European Union. They'll need to basically be certified according to or be compliant with the MiCA regulation, right? The only problem with that is that, well, MiCA regulations come out pretty quickly. There's a lot of confusion about how it really applies, right? And, there's still gaps in when it's going to be enforced. What is the real compliance requirement, and so on and so forth. And I think that's the opportunity for industry really to come together alongside the regulator and say, okay, well, you've presented this kind of regulation to us, right? And this is how we're going to respond. Because there's no point in being, I'm the best at compliance, right? Like nobody wins a prize for being the best at compliance. It's just like, okay, well, we need to comply. Let's figure out what the compliance requirement is. And so we kind of try to help with industry in that respect. And that's also, helping to bridge between different jurisdictions as well for them to learn and understand the best practices. We've got a project, so we've called it the Mika Alliance, where we've got quite a few layer one blockchain technologies. We've got, law firms who are coming together, who are all sitting together and say, okay, well, there is this compliance requirement. You need to produce a white paper if you are a token, right? How can we actually do that in a way that is efficient, that is compliant, right? And gives a standard for the industry. Given that the regulator's not giving us that information, we need to basically present to them what we're going to do. And I think that's kind of the way industry can best kind of reflect and interact with regulation, where there is kind of some form of ambiguity. And where there isn't that kind of coming together, that's where you see the fragmentation, right? That's where you see, okay, I don't want to go into this particular industry because I'm fearful of the regulation or whatever. And that's also the same when you just have constant, round tables and kind of industry groups getting together that just come and talk, but don't take action, right? So like one of the things we're doing, we're building the tools. We're building the tools, for example, we're building a large language model that's going to help, people write their white paper. We're building, the indicators that they need to show compliance with respect to, certain factors. For example, if you're a blockchain technology with a token, you need to produce, what is your water usage? You need to produce what is your waste generated, right? Like how many layer ones who are trading know how much water are you using to actually power my token, right? How much waste are we generating? All these kind of things, right? So that's where the kind of the usefulness of industry coming together and interfacing with the regulator can work, and that's where lessons learned from this kind of industry partnership can be applied across jurisdictions as well to get them talking to be more forward thinking, I think.
Yeah, that's good. How are you ensuring that this doesn't just become its own silo? Like I think about, as you were speaking, I was thinking about OpenAI maybe started as the same kind of altruistic endeavor of, hey, this for the sake of mankind, sake of humankind, billionaires come together and chuck some money at a thing, not for profit, in order to break down the silos. But then fast forward a couple of years, it becomes its own silo. How are you working towards not just becoming another silo?
I think, so we decided when we created this that we're just going to be one partner and that it's going to be run by a committee of experts that are coming in. So we're just going to be a facilitator of the decision making, because this alliance body, we're going to supply the technology to it that can be utilized. We're going to build it, and then the members themselves are going to basically nominate the individuals who sit around there to make the decisions on, say, what is the standard we're going to adopt? What is the decision that's going to be made about this particular part of the compliance requirement, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, therefore, if industry is nominating people, then you get, more decentralization. And I think, you can keep closer to the original mission, perhaps, of the organization and the initiative. The thing that always tears this kind of stuff apart, and again with OpenAI, is the personalities involved. And that was a big one, right? And indeed, the strangeness of OpenAI being kind of a non-profit that is one of the most valuable kind of for-profit making entities that kind of exists in a sense. It's kind of a dichotomy, right? It's like so you got to make sure that the purpose of the organization is retained, and if you don't have that, then it's just not going to be an effective kind of thing that grows in the future.
Yeah. In terms of blockchain, we've kind of maybe danced around it a little bit, but how are you using blockchain to enable AI and quantum computing and AR and other kinds of tech? Is blockchain like a foundation layer, or is AI the foundation everything's built upon it? Is it really a collaborative, like equal parts kind of endeavor? How do you see blockchain specifically fitting in with that kind of collaboration across different technologies?
Yeah, I mean, blockchain itself at its fundamental is a technology that enables more efficient business processes, right? So if we're talking, let's take about the use case of AI, right? With AI, you've got kind of your data layer, you've got your compute layer, and then you've got your inference layer, right? So you've got these three particular layers. And for each of those, you have some requirement where you want kind of the biggest kind of use cases there is around data provenance and tracking. So the business process you want here is to really understand what decisions are being taken and to be able to track those in a much more efficient way, right? And so here, blockchain again is just an enabler of providing the efficiency needed in order to be able to get the outcome that you want. So here it's particularly a supporting technology. AI is at the front. AI is what you really want to interface with, but you have some requirements that need to be around that. And particularly, again, you've got new regulations for AI that have come on. You've got the EU AI Act that came out a couple of months ago that will start to go into enforcement at the beginning of 2025, right? With the types of models, you're going to have to be able to prove like your model is low risk, right? You're going to have to prove like why your model makes the decisions it may make. You've got to prove like where you've got your data from. What technology are you going to utilize to be able to show that in a way that enables a regulator to have a look, or for a compliance firm to come and audit you and say, okay, I agree, that's all transparent, that's all traceable, that's all self-evident. You've got blockchain technology, right? But the thing about blockchain is it fits in so many different ways. So that example I've just talked about, well, that's great for tracking and that's great for compliance, right? But then what about if you want to, think about enabling those devices that are powered by AI and a machine economy to be able to transact efficiently with each other, right? And be able to understand how they're communicating or what the decision-making logic is in the economic transactions that they may make with each other. And that's where, you've got the other part of blockchain, which is the smart contract layer and tokens and so forth, and micropayments come into a view as well. And that's, that's a whole field of agentic AI taking off and the machine economy taking off, where it can also be utilized as well. So it's primarily in all these aspects, it is the supporting technology, right, that helps to improve the efficiencies. Because all of that stuff, doing micropayments with agentic AI, with our conventional payment systems, you just can't do it, right? There's no way you can support small payments with our conventional fiat monetary system. And the payment rails, in fact, that we do have, you need to use something like blockchain, which has kind of built from the bottom up a efficient mechanism of enabling that.
Yeah. Well, so then what needs to happen in terms of we talked a lot about like the commercialization aspect and like the building part. What needs to change at the higher education or university level in terms of how we're teaching future or even current/future academics, researchers, builders, coders? Does anything need to like philosophically change about how they're being taught? Obviously, at a practical level, you want it to be best practice and cutting edge and whatnot. What about at a philosophical level? How can we kind of imbue some of the things you're talking about before people come out of university and hit with the capital world and all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, so as one foot as a professor, I kind of teach a number of courses at university, and I've seen kind of students who in the last couple of years, have started using large language models for their particular work, and the influence of it has kind of become more subtle, right? Like if you took me 2 years ago when ChatGPT sort of came out, just came out, like I had people submitting in things that were entirely generated by ChatGPT, right? And they were like, they hadn't even bothered to read it, right? Because I remember one piece of coursework. ChatGPT was coming out with different. It got the acronym wrong. Like the acronym was like large language LLM, but ChatGPT in their coursework put it as large locus whatever, right? And it was like you haven't even read the work that you're trying to submit, right? And it was like painfully obvious about these things. Nowadays, it's much more subtle. It's a little bit harder. The easiest way you can tell is kind of if you've seen someone's work and perhaps English is not their first language, and then you see something they send as a coursework which is written in perfect English. Well, okay, then there's something kind of flashing that okay, there's probably something being utilized here. And then you kind of also see the baseline increase, right? Like the baseline of everyone's work is just much higher now, because there's this kind of because they're just using these particular tools, checking their work, it's being communicated in a better way. But then I've seen that the ability to go above and beyond has decreased.
Okay.
So previously, while you had a large spread, right, and you had really, really excellent pieces of work being submitted, now everything's become compressed. You kind of see like the baseline has gone up, but then people aren't putting in the extra effort to really get to, okay, original thinking and going above and beyond. And I think that's the kind of immediate danger we have in academia with these particular tools. It's just making people lazy. It's making people stop thinking about how they can really go above and beyond and how they can actually utilize these tools in the best possible way. And even, even at the foundation, we've got some researchers and particularly, the interns that we have, for example, some of them particularly previously came and, you'd ask them to do something and they'd come to you and they'd have a response, right? And you ask them questions about this response and they don't have an answer for certain things. And then you get it out of them that ChatGPT has just produced this or a large language model has just produced.
Yeah.
But then the response simply to them is, okay, well, if I've asked you to do something and you've come back simply going to a prompt, putting in a prompt and giving it back to me, why do I need you? You're yourself, like your own worth in the higher order cognitive thinking ability. You're kind of talking you're physically putting yourself out of a job because you're not choosing to apply. And that's the biggest, that's the thing that worries me the most at the moment about, working with and teaching students. It's to basically help them to understand that, you can always take the easy path, right? Mm-hmm. But in the long term, that's not going to give you the benefit that it needs, right? These are just tools, and you need to learn how to use these tools in order to actually improve your performance and to improve your ability to participate in the world, not be a bystander while they are producing everything that you need and you just sit back and relax, right? Because that's going to have a consequence, not only for you, in the workplace environment, in fact, whether or not you have a job even in the future, right? And that's going to have a consequence on your potential as well. Because you shouldn't say, my potential is only the ability for me to go to a screen and simply type something in, take the output, and then give it to somebody. My potential is to take that and to build and to really take that and do something important with it, right? To really put some great thought into it and improve it and to use that as a building block in my own thinking process that goes above and beyond, right? And I think that's what academia needs to kind of clamp down on a bit. And it's difficult to do, right? Because you can tell students, well, we've got these fantastic AI detectors, right, that are able to tell whether or not your essay is being written by AI. But unfortunately, that doesn't exist, right? And whoever is producing or telling you that they have some tool that can detect if it's AI, you can't detect if it's AI, right? Yeah. It's absolutely impossible. And so, yeah, that I would say is the current issue that I'm seeing quite a bit in academia. And the only way to resolve that is perhaps to have some parts of it where we go back to the basics and other parts of it where we kind of say embrace and do what you like. And you have a bit of both, right? And that's why we're trying to bring back pen and paper tests. Because that's the only way we can really say that, okay, now we can really test that you've learned something. And it's kind of interesting because, maybe you have one coursework where you can use AI as much as you want, but as well as that, you've got the pen and paper test, right? So you've got to balance the both, right?
It strikes me that if the LLMs are being trained on academic papers, then there's this kind of, that compression leads to like an intellectual death spiral of kind of mediocrity and further compression. Yeah, man, I hadn't considered that the exceptional, it might lift everybody from the bottom, but it also, that compression also happens at the top end as well. That is super interesting and a little bit frightening, actually.
No, it's definitely something that the, the pain appears in different ways. I would have said previously the pain was just marking something that was written very poorly, but now the pain is just marking the same thing that's come out 50 times, right? Because it's just the same kind of thing being regurgitated in slightly different language, where there is a very little variety in what you're seeing in terms of how thought is being deployed. And yeah, I mean, and no matter how much you tell students it's not good to do this and that they should do that, at the end of the day, I understand everyone's got pressure, right? You've got deadlines, you've got to find work, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And if something's there that's going to make your life easier, you're going to do it, right? And but you've got to have the discipline to say, okay, fine, let's use it in a proper way that actually doesn't diminish my own capabilities, but actually in a way actually amplifies it.
Yeah, there needs to be some, again, motivation towards that end. That is a bigger carrot, perhaps a bigger stick, but a bigger carrot than just I can take the simplest path forward, but rather what's the best path forward. Yeah, man, that's a big deal, especially I might sound like an old person now, but especially with younger people. And I was one of those younger people, right, looking for the simplest solution or the shortcut, maybe you might say. But back in my day, we didn't have AI and whatnot. That is the thing that led to innovation rather than a compression of innovation. Yeah, man, that's a big deal. Well, so thinking about the year ahead then, 2025, what are your kind of fearless forecasts for the year ahead? You're at the kind of bleeding edge of innovation, across and at the collaboration of multiple different kinds of technologies. What do you think are going to be the big narratives for 2025?
I mean, I think, firstly, it's the outcome of the US election, right? Like a completely different, and we hope a completely different change in the regulatory environment in the United States, right? For how blockchain and crypto is being treated. And I hope it does come to fruition, right? Because we had kind of similar expectations where Gary Gensler came in as the head of the SEC, right? He'd come from MIT, he was teaching blockchain at MIT, and everyone was like, yes, finally we've got someone who understands. And then it just went the other way, right?
Might have had a little bit to do with FTX and him trying to
sure.
create a little bit, prove his bona fides.
I know, but it's FTX in the grand scheme of all kind of things that happen in the financial services world was very small, right?
I mean, just about Sam's parents being friends with Gary and whatnot. Sorry, what I was getting at. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, back to you.
But and then so that's I mean that's the one part, and I think with respect to that improved kind of regulatory framework in the United States, hopefully that pushes adoption. Because now you've got all those enterprises that were sitting on the sidelines saying, I don't know, the regulation is not maybe right where I need it to be. Those guys, and many of them, I mean, we've talked about in the course of our work, I've talked to a lot of banks, who basically told me, like, we're secretly working on blockchain things and, in experimenting with DeFi stuff and all this kind of stuff, but we're just not announcing anything publicly just because of the regulatory environment. That fear will vanish. Right. And then you will really see kind of institutional adoption, people coming off the sidelines and saying, let's get going. And I think we've also got to the point where, it's not going to be like, okay, like it was, I don't know, 5 years ago, blockchain is the cure for every problem. Now we know there's a few kind of specific things where really blockchain is going to have an impact. We're talking here about, real world assets and tokenization of these, right? Talking about the intersection with AI, these particular areas, then I think you'll see, a greater push. So this is one of the fearless forecasts. I just think 2025 is the year where we see another leap in adoption of these technologies. Right, that's kind of one. Another one I would say is 2025 will be the year where kind of AI makes or break AI, in the sense that there's been a great deal of hype. Right, people are continuing to expect that there's going to be exponential growth in model performance, and it's kind of counterbalanced by the fact that, again, with the new administration coming to the US, that they're going to deregulate, people are going to be able to do more in terms of, using models and deploying them. But that has to lead to something, right? And if you're not seeing that improved push, you're not seeing more and more capability come out of these models, then again, it's just going to be like the hype cycle all over again. There's just going to be like a death spiral on AI itself. And the last one, I think it's just greater polarization across the world, right? And that's the thing that I hope is not going to is going to not impact the forward moving, momentum we've had with these particular technologies. So on the one side, you've got like great regulation in the US, but then if the US is not interacting with the EU, then you've got kind of problems between the fact that blockchain is a technology which is supposed to be one where stakeholders across the globe collaborate for it to have really great effects. Well, yeah, you can collaborate, but only in the US, or you can collaborate, but only in the EU, right? And so it's I don't know which one is going to have more of an influence on that, right? But that's the thing. I mean, that's my prediction, that there's more adoption for blockchain. Finally, it's the time with more specific use cases. It's the make or break year for AI. And it's the year where we have to kind of figure out how to deal with this polarization that's just going to come into place.
Yeah, man. I think you're spot on with those. Do you have any? Well, I mean, one of the last thing we like to ask all of the guests are: do you have any particularly contrarian views? It doesn't have to be controversial, but just everyone's swimming one direction, but you're swimming another direction, or everyone seems to be thinking this is going to be great, or everyone thinks this is going to be terrible, but you think the opposite. Where should we be looking that we're not looking? It's basically what I'm asking.
I think for the blockchain space, I think it's actually, one of the things is it's ripe for consolidation, and I think we're going to see consolidation coming into the industry, which we have kind of seen a little bit of. I mean, you saw the merger of Fetch, Singularity, and Ocean, right, as kind of a precursor, even, for blockchain and AI, that occurring. But I think that's just going to be something that is needs to occur for the industry, because if you look at any kind of like disruptive technology evolution, you always kind of see that there's many of them that come out and are born into the ecosystem, but only kind of in the end a few survive, right? Like in the like mobile phone operating systems, there's iOS versus Android, right? There's only going to be a few of them, and we're already seeing that in the blockchain space, right? If you think about iOS and the blockchain space, this is kind of the EVM world, right? And if you've got Android, this is a kind of the Rust-based or the kind of the Solana-based universe that you have as well, right? So there's going to be a whole bunch of consolidation that's coming. And I think it's going to come faster than people think, because that's the only way. There's no need for 100 different blockchain technologies.
Yeah.
What do you need to use 100 different layer one technologies for, right? So I think this consolidation.
M&A, or would that be attrition?
I think it will be a mixture of both. I think you'll see the gap between the top end and the bottom become much, much larger, right? And then you'll kind of see people thinking about, okay, how do we, and those at the bottom end in particular, about how can we survive? Well, the only way they can survive is through merging, and that's through bringing what their specializations are, really. But I think that's my kind of contrarian view, that's going to come faster than people think.
I mean, it actually sounds healthy for the ecosystem, though.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Well, so if people want to find out more about, or hear more from you, or find out more about Exponential Science Foundation, where can they find you online?
Sure. If you go to exp.science, right, that's our website. And that has kind of all the stuff that we're up to. It has all kind of the research work, has all the education resources that we have, all the innovation projects. And even, one of the things we're doing now as well is we're expanding into investing. So if you've got some great ideas in the startup space, or your company is looking for capital, come and knock on our door. We're more than happy to have a conversation with you. And we can do more than just give funding, right? Because we've got, a small army of researchers who can help, really think about, giving you tokenomics advice, or helping think through some problems that you have, and really give that value added, perhaps the other kind of perhaps just capital investors may not have. So that's kind of something that we can help you with. So that's the best place to come and find out about us and find out about our projects, like for example the Mika Alliance as well, that you can learn more about. And yeah, just drop us a line. We're more than happy to have a conversation and to see what we can do.
Good on you, Nikhil. Thanks heaps for joining us on the show today. We barely got to talk about DeSci as well, which I was very keen to pick your brains about. So maybe we'll have to have her on the show again and go deep into decentralized science. Sounds super interesting. But otherwise, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
It's great. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain. We love bringing you great guests like Nikhil, and I hope we've inspired you to think more about Web3, about technology, about the future, and how you might be involved in building it. As always, like, subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word, and join us again next week for another exciting episode of Off Chain. Till then, take care.